Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsonelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you all here with me today, and I have a wonderful guest, Mr. Matthew Brackett. So Matthew, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you, Kat. It's great to be here on the chat with Kat. Oh, the real chat, right? The real chat with Kat.
The real chat. I'm so excited to dive into this. Yeah. So Matthew, do us all a favor then as we jump right into the podcast. Tell us, who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you into your space.
Thank you. Matthew Brackett from small town New England, the 10th of 13 children to my parents who have since deceased. And what do I do now? Really, I support those that are in positions of power, authority, and influence to use this, what I would call sacred force, in a healthy and life-giving way, in a way that safeguards their priorities and helps them to lead better, to love better, and to live better. So I would say something like a professional holistic leadership coach, consultant, and educator.
I love that. Oh, and I love that you combine all of them. I think that so many of us get kind of stuck in like, I am only a coach. And I think that there's so many unique pieces in between to be able to say coach, consultant, teacher, and like really kind of bridge that gap, because I do feel like we kind of fall into those categories, when we really think about what it is that we do in our business, for a lot of us, not for everyone, but
yes, but no, I do a lot of individual coaching. So when I sit in those sessions, I sit and I tell my clients, we're going to go, there's a few lanes in our sessions. One is the coaching, because, I really believe in the art of coaching. But then there's mentorship, then there's the consulting lane and the education lane. And I think that's just a way to better serve my clients.
Yeah.
So yes, and I like to break down leadership because leadership is it's a term that's used so often. It means everything and nothing at the same time.
I agree with that one.
Such an important topic. But in the end, it's really how we not only navigate, but how we exercise power, authority, influence, whether it be in formal positions or whether it just be in our life, how we live our lives, how we live our intimate relationships and professional relationships and in organizational contexts. So there's a lot there, and I said a sacred force because, again, power and authority, whether we like it or not, it's always going to be part of the human experience. Sadly, it's been used in very poor ways, in very destructive ways in some circles or environments. And so I think in the newer generation, that's created a lot of rejection towards hierarchy and rejection towards authority and all that. But in reality, it's always going to exist, whether it be formally or informally. And so how can we do this better as human beings in any sector?
I love that. We may have to dive into leadership a little bit and kind of, really get your take on that and where you focus that and how you feel like that helps and what it is that you do. But I want to bring us back to, the beginning, because I want to know how you even got in this space, because the way that you come at this with understanding the authority and having these types of conversations of this kind of open-minded leadership where we don't feel like we need to be above everyone, I think is a beautiful factor. But I'd also love to know, like, how did you get into, how did you know that this was kind of what you wanted to do? Like, where did that come from? I'm always interested in the backstory, because I really think that it also helps people understand where it is that you came from and how your business is different from someone else who may do, let's say, something similar that is along the lines of coaching and leadership.
Right. Yes, there's a bit of a saturated market right now. So you also asked, why do I do what I do? And then I'll say
Yes.
where I come from. So
Yes.
I do what I do because I'm very passionate and I would say in love with the complex beauty of the human person and in all of its facets. And it's about serving people so that we can, as I said before, so that we can lead better, so that we can love better, and so that we can live better. Because that's what we all essentially deep down we all want to do. And so I'm very passionate about the human person and about how we interact. And then in this case, how we exercise power, authority, and influence. Because as I said before, it'll always be part of the human experience. And I firmly believe that as human beings, we can do a lot better. So this is my little contribution to history or to people and to society. Now, where do I come from also has a lot to do why I do what I do. Everyone's background is unique. Mine is likewise unique or equally unique. And so I left home at the age of 18 on a mission to serve. And that for me, it made sense in that moment of my life to go to what we would call seminary, which led me to become a Catholic priest. So there was 10 years of training and education where you study all the normal things around spirituality, classical humanities, philosophy, and theology. And it begins with 2 years of intense, what we call spiritual boot camp, 2 years of really stepping away from the world and delving into life in the spirit. So where there's a lot of silence, a lot of discipline, a lot of prayer, connection with oneself and connection with the transcendent in that context that we would call God. So so there was 10 years of preparation and education for that. And then I received what they would call ordination as a priest, as a Catholic priest. And that brought me to different countries, working in ministry, working also in positions of leadership in those different structures. So I worked in Colombia and South America, Chile, also in South America. I was in Ireland for 5 years. I was in Italy for about 10 years. And then another chapter of that, which was so fascinating and which I loved, was as a chaplain and staff officer in the United States Navy, where I served with sailors and Marines. So yeah, definitely a very diverse background, been able to work interculturally in different languages. And when you're in ministry, the wonderful thing is you're not, when I go to countries, you work with people, you're not there as a tourist. You become part of the fabric of society and of people's lives. So very fortunate to have been part of thousands and thousands of people's lives. And in that role, you're part of people's most brightest and happiest moments. And you're also part of the deepest and darkest moments and the hardest moments that people can go through, tragic moments and sad. And so it's very fortunate to have walked what I call on the sacred ground of people's lives for so many years in so many different cultures and languages, and also with our dear sailors and Marines in the Navy and Marine Corps. So that's a little bit of my background. Now I left. Then there's a story. The stories with everything, but of why why I'm no longer doing that. The simple answer is, after many years of trying to figure it out, because it just didn't seem that things were fitting, that I just figured there wasn't the right place for me to flourish, even though there's so many wonderful experiences and being able to touch so many lives and to grow in my own way. It just wasn't the right place for me. And it's a very complex decision to make, like many decisions in life. And so it made sense to do what I do now because of all of that life experience. It's really, I want to continue to serve people. And there's many ways that I suppose I could serve people because I have such a diverse background. And there's many things that I'm passionate about, which makes marketing very difficult because I like to do a lot of things. And so that's why I do what I do, because I want to continue to serve people. And why do I focus on, I mean, I already said why I focus on it, but I've come from very hierarchical structures. I've seen excellent and healthy leadership,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be in the Catholic Church, whether it be in the religious order that I was part of, whether it be in the Department of Defense. But I've also seen very dysfunctional leadership in all of those organizations. So I think I've been privy to the beauties and the beasts of wonderful and poor leadership.
I I love that you share this journey though, because one, you have an extremely diverse background, and the cultures that you got to be immersed in, to me, is so wonderful because a lot of us, especially here in the United States, we get kind of stuck in our ways. But there's a lot of other countries that have these beautiful cultures and these beautiful diverse way of seeing things that I think that we're missing. And so being able to be a part of that and immerse yourself in it, like you said, not just as a tourist, but like actually being able to be a part of that human is something that a lot of us, I feel like, need more of, because it would
Mhm.
allow us the space to see all of the other beauties in the world that we are missing out on because of the way that our society has kind of leaned toward, as well. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to touch base on, what you said as far as it just wasn't right for you. This is something that, for a lot of entrepreneurs that I speak with, have all kind of come to this conclusion of, I did this for so long, whether it was corporate America, I was a stay-at-home parent, every different background. I've had people that have been biochemists and all of these things. And then they just kind of like do a 180 and go this different direction. But I love that you bring this up, because I think that it really kind of shows people that no matter what it is that you start with, it doesn't mean that that's where you have to end. And it's always great for us to learn to evolve and take in the things that we have learned throughout the years, and then really be able to hone in and say, okay, is this what I really love to do? Do I want to continue this? Or does it look like my path is actually leading down somewhere else? And being able to choose that path that's leading down somewhere else, that's bravery and courage in itself, because that's completely unknown. And for a lot of us, it's a lot easier to stay in the
Mhm.
normal and the
Definitely.
no because it's safe.
Definitely. There's different personality styles in this. So there's different personality styles adapt better to certain situations, or some are more adept to to take risks, others less. So there's a lot of things that come into play. And there's always a price to be paid. And I think it's just I like to be realistic about it. There's always but there's the unknown, right? And there's then what we're leaving behind. Right? There's a grieving process in any of those transformations. Even if we know why we're doing it, we could still be leaving something behind, something that we're very familiar with, that we know, and that has a safety and security linked to it. And that's important for us as human beings. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
right. There's an element of courage in any transition. What's important is that we have a lot of as much clarity as we can of why we're doing it,
Mm,
because that will give us direction and give us purpose and meaning as we walk down the mysterious path of whatever it is, of the unknown, whether it be entrepreneurship or whether it be starting a new career. It's definitely challenging. I don't want to I don't want to take away from that. If people can glorify all of these things, wow, it's amazing. No, everything has a price. And there's
yeah.
prices that I've had to pay. And so try to do our due diligence as we make decisions, as we discern through things, and say, well, what prices am I willing to pay? What prices am I not willing to pay? What sacrifices am I going to make? And so it's important that we have our values aligned, or at least clear, and also our strengths, and also why we're doing what we're doing, why we're leaving behind something, and why we're going towards where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes it in, I don't want to sugarcoat it takes time to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Some people have a lot more clarity really quick. Others, it takes time.
Yeah.
And oftentimes these aren't things that we can do on our own. Because as human beings, the way we process a lot of things, whether it be experiences, thoughts, emotions, the way is through expression, transforming them into words, whether it be journaling or writing down, whether it be what we're doing right here, is talking back and forth. it's important for us to do that as human beings. That's one way that we process things, that we gain clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And so to make sure that when we do go through these big moments in life, whether it be difficulties and then whether it be transitions, that we have people that we can lean on and share with to help us gain clarity.
Yeah, that's definitely an important one. And I feel like a lot of us are kind of stuck in trying to figure that out for a little while. And like you said, everything has a price to pay. And sometimes that means losing friends to be able to find those that will support, that will carry you, that will encourage you so that you can go the direction
Mhm.
that you want to go. So I have to ask this because, you were immersed in so many different cultures over the years. Do you feel like understanding and seeing all of these different ways that other people lead in different countries, do you think that that really played a role in the way that you now coach, consult, and teach others in how to lead in a different way?
Mm. I think, I think all of our experiences, it builds us up, it makes us who we are, and it serves us well. What I want to say is the first thing that comes to mind is that my discovery is that human beings are very similar wherever we go. Now, there's cultural differences and a lot of things that culturally differentiate us around
Mm-hmm.
mentality, practices, traditions, and the way we view things. But in the end, when we really talk about the challenges or the things that we want as human beings and the challenges that we have, my discovery is that it's pretty much it's across the board, it's very similar. So I would say that between my education and my experience, I've been very fortunate to become, I guess I would say, an expert in the human person and how we function. And so that definitely serves me well in what I do now, because I think I have a deeper knowledge of the human person than your typical coach or leadership
Mm-hmm.
coach, whatever. And then the studies that I did a master's at Penn State in the psychology of leadership. And that really helped kind of take all that experience and other types of education and reframe it differently in a model of psychology of leadership, of what is the human experience of leadership and followership from how we're wired as human beings. And the tons of I didn't realize there was so much research on this and all the stuff that was there. It gave me just a new window to reframe a lot of the experiences or to make sense of a lot of things that I'd been through.
Mm-hmm.
I experienced, because I was in an organization that historically has become known to have to have had a psychopath founder and leader for
Yeah.
decades, right? And so it's a great case study, and then the pattern that created in a lot of people, and then also being in the military. And then when you study leadership, you also study a lot of leadership in the military environment because it's an easy place
Mm.
to do studies, to do research.
Okay.
So it helped me look back on a lot of my experiences and make sense of things or put terms on things to be able to name things uh, appropriately. And I found that very helpful.
Okay.
A
That
bit
makes
of a
a lot of
long-winded
sense.
answer
No,
to your question.
no, it's a great one. I'm curious to know, out of the studies and everything that you did and how you were able to kind of define things, what would be one or two of those things that for you saw pop up a lot, and being able to see these studies and be a part of it allowed you to kind of nail down, like, this is kind of what I think this is, and this is kind of the definition of it, kind of a scenario.
What are you referring to leadership or things that I saw?
Leadership.
Leadership. Oh boy. Okay.
I know we can go so many directions.
I'll just
That's
get
why I was like, let's start with like two.
No, it has helped. It does because once you step into leadership space, you realize there's a lot of definitions. I'll give you three.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go from simpler to more complex. One is leadership is influence. That's the way John Maxwell would define it. Very simple. Leadership is influence. Now, influence comes, I like this because it comes from a Latin word, influo, influere, which means to pour into.
Okay.
And I think just through relationships, we are constantly pouring into people. it's important for us to think about how we pour into those around us.
Mm.
Whether it be in official positions of authority or just people that we are around. And if I had two glasses here, I could pour water, something that is life-giving and nutritional, into one glass, and I could pour something toxic into another. And we can have both of those things inside of us for whatever reason. And it's not only how we behave, it's also who we are. If we look at maybe some of the greater figures of toxic or dysfunctional leadership in history, it wasn't just how they behaved, it's just there was something really distorted in them as people that made them very damaging. So it comes from who we are and then how we behave. So leadership is influence. A more academic definition is leadership is really a dynamic process of influence of one person over others to achieve a common goal. So we have a few things. Dynamic process of one person, so one person over another in relationship to achieve a common goal. It's a very neutral definition. In other words, there's nothing moral or ethical in that definition. Like, is our common goal negative or positive?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very neutral definition of leadership. In my own definitions, since I came across around 380, I said, well, I'm going to add my own. But it depends on the context. But leadership I see it as an exchange, a mutual exchange of being and behavior. In other words, that in leadership, it's not a one-way street. You're a parent, you are influenced by your children, right? And if you're in a relationship, a romantic relationship or a spousal relationship, you are influenced by your spouse. So it's a mutual exchange of being and behavior that influences, but also empowers. Now, my approach is very holistic and is very positive type of leadership it's all about that we want in leadership, we want people to grow. So that's why I say we influence, but also empowers people to reach a common goal and to reach personal potential.
I like that one.
Okay, so as leaders, we want to, yes, we have a goal, but I want my people to grow in the process. And if we look at the words authority, if we look at the words power, the authority is, again, coming from a Latin word of auctoritas, which is, we can think of the word author, someone who gives birth to, who generates, who engenders, who is really life-giving. It's a word that's very life-giving. And in the same with power, if we go back, I know both of us come from a faith tradition. If we go back even just the biblical story of creation, whether believe it or not, and it's an allegory which helps us understand creation, is that when God created, it was a dynamic, powerful action that did good, right? Where the biblical text says, and God saw that everything was good. So when we're in positions, or however we use power, authority, and influence and leadership, that we can always use it for good, that it's life-giving, that it's building up. And that's the sad thing when we look at just the way sometimes it's used, how destructive it can be. And so that's why it's a sacred force that is meant to be used for good. And when it's used for bad or used in unhealthy ways or dysfunctional ways or whatever we want to say, it can be very destructive for the human person. And when that happens in the environment of family and in the environment of faith, the destruction touches the deeper fibers of the human person because of what family means and because of what faith means to us as human beings.
Yeah.
So those are some of my definitions of leadership.
I love that though so much. And what's really interesting is, the way that you use power and authority is in such an empowering and positive way. And I feel like, and you kind of touched on this too, that for a lot of people, authority and power have this negative connotation behind it because of the way that it's been used, right? Oh, this person's in a place of power and he's abusing it. This person had authority over people and he abused it. Like, there has been this negative that has been attached to the word, when in reality, if you look at definitions, when you gave the definition before, there isn't really a negative or a positive. It's very factual. And we have allowed other people's influences and beliefs and the way that they presume a specific word to then kind of take over how all of us see it. So I love that you took that away from them and really shifted it to what it does have the capability of, what it does have the ability to have the meaning of, and how it also can be used. Because I do feel like there are a lot of words and phrases in our world that have been shifted in one direction. And so therefore we avoid it, when in reality, there's actually so much more meaning behind it and ways to understand it. And then you would be able to use it in this different light. But a lot of us are afraid to, because that's not the normality that we see in every day.
Right. Right. We base a lot of things on experience. So in this case, we've had poor experiences, or in the media has published a lot of negative experiences of people who use power authority in a bad way, and then it taints the term. And I think also in the American culture is, freedom is very independence, and freedom is a sacred value that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so automatically, even unconsciously, since we treasure freedom and independence, then we can see authority and power as a threat to my freedom and independence, when it's not meant to be that. Right? It's meant to serve that. But I
Yeah.
think unconsciously in our culture, because we treasure that so much because of our history, and unconsciously we can draw that conclusion. Well, if we need freedom and independence, then anything that has to do with power authority is a threat against that. Obviously not necessarily so. That's not meant to be like that.
Yeah.
So that's one reflection that might help around that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So when you are working with your clients, or you're working with the company and you're really looking at helping them shift this perspective, this mindset, essentially, what are some of the what are some of the tools that you use to just kind of get people in that frame of reference to start being able to see things slightly different so that we do have the ability to change it?
Mm, right. And let me step back before I answer that question about something else around what we were talking about is the people that get into, because it's related, the people that step into leadership roles, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
political or corporate or whatever. It's very interesting because the ego is very interesting. The ego it's a necessity we have as human beings, but it can easily get distorted,
Mm-hmm.
or take over in negative ways.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes what happens. And there's some traps for us as human beings. And one of them is power. Another one is fame. Another trap can be money. And so
Mm-hmm.
when those things begin to take over, because our ego likes that, because it gives it a sense of security and identity, then we can become very blinded. And that's one thing that we want to take into account. Another thing that we want to take into account in the studies on toxic leadership is very interesting. The whole thing about personal charisma.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we love about people. It's sort of a magnet that draws us to people, is when they have this personal attraction or charisma, where it's just sort of like this mysterious thing that you really can't put your finger on, but there's something magnetic about this person. What's interesting in the studies on toxic leadership is that every toxic leader, when they in the research and studies, they were charismatic.
Hmm. Interesting.
Now, doesn't mean not every charismatic person is toxic, right? So we don't want to draw that conclusion.
Yeah.
But what's in the common denominator when they study toxic leaders is very interesting. They had this charisma. So, I think there's a bright side to it, and then there's a shadow side. And
Mm-hmm.
if an individual has that charisma, which is it's a great power, but if we don't know how to keep it in check, and if we don't know how to pay attention to the shadow side of that, or to understand where it's coming from and
Mm-hmm.
what it might be looking for, um, we have to be very careful. So that's why, going to your question now about working with people, is that's why I believe very much in, first of all, the will that a person in a position of leadership has the desire to know more about themselves, to grow in what I would call self-awareness.
Mm.
Self-awareness is one of the greatest leadership assets, and the lack of it is one of the greatest leadership liabilities. The challenge is that when a person is in a leadership role, it's like, well, I'm I'm good at if I got to where I'm at, then I must be really good at what I do.
Yeah.
But what need do I have? I said, well, the higher you go, if we want to use the hierarchical structure, the more power authority you have, the more important it is that you be increasingly self-aware.
Mm.
Because the more blind spots you have, the higher you go, the more liabilities there are, the more possible detriments there are in the way you use that. So it's a demand that is placed on people in authority to work on themselves, to develop themselves, and to have less blind spots. We all have them as human beings. I think we just have to we believe that, we accept that. So, but the deceiving factor is that someone in leadership role said, well, I'm here, I'm good at what I do, I've been very successful. Why would I need to work on myself? So that's why I believe very much in the coaching, that individual process, because it forces leaders or people to slow down, to pay attention to what's going on inside of them, and to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to what's going on outside of them. And then it's that space again, because we all need to process things, so then where they can talk about things. And then what comes up in there is not only things about themselves, but then they begin to think about, oh, I can there's ways that I need to communicate better. There's ways that I need to listen better. I have to try to develop my people better. There's a whole different little bunch of things that come up in those sessions around
Yeah.
how they lead. So I think that's very important. And it's not only coaching, but again, like there's this consulting, there's education, but it's that sacred, safe space where someone has a confidant, a qualified confidant that will help them grow. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that comes into mind when you were asking questions around, and it goes back to what I just said, really, a lot of the communication is huge. It's funny because as human beings, that's what we're relational beings. So we communicate from day one. But it's also one of the greatest challenges we have as humans.
Oh,
Communication is one of
yes.
the greatest challenges. So it's, I think teaching leaders how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't go into all what that means, but how to communicate, how to develop our people. The whole, all just everything about teamwork, how we work in
Yeah.
team. Um, well, there's a whole lot of topics that we could go into, and then just structure. When you're in organizations, and that's why I believe a lot in bringing things from outsourcing some things, because we are often not the greatest judge of our own situation. So
Yeah.
when we outsource some services, it might shed a lot of light on our structure. The way the way our hiring process, the way we choose talent, where
Mm-hmm.
we position people. That's another thing. How with the people that we put in positions.
Yes.
And I think so. If we invest a little bit more time in that and doing that well, we end up saving a lot of time and even saving a lot of money, and saving, not only saving, but improving the culture.
Mm-hmm.
But when we don't do that well, the retention level will probably suffer. There's a lot of different things. So investing and this is another one, investing in the environment. And I don't mean, and I'm nothing against the environment, but I don't mean that. But what I'm referring to is culture, the internal environment of an organization or of a team.
Yeah.
It's because there's a lot of intangibles there. So how do we? But there's ways to measure it, and there's ways to work on it, and very simple ways. But it's what are the things that we need to tweak to improve the organizational culture and environment.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the things that come up. Well, and I'll conclude with this one, is that organizations will place people in leadership roles because of their technical expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And they really might set them up for failure because you're great at what you do at this technical expertise. So because you're so good at this, we're going to place you in this position. That might really hurt them because that
Yeah.
might not be playing to their strengths. Now, what an organization would do, we're going to place you in this position. First of all, let's assess if that's what you want, and if you have the right skill set for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ways to do that. And then we're going to also either prepare you or give you some accompaniment, mentorship, coaching, whatever it is, as you begin this role, so that you can succeed. We really want to set people up for success, because we don't set leaders up for success. It not only affects them, but it affects people below them, affects the organization, affects a lot of things.
Yeah.
But that means investing. And a lot of companies are like, oh, we don't want to invest in that. We don't need to. Well, then maybe you're going to pay the price for not investing in that, right? And
Yeah.
You're going to spend the money somewhere else.
Correct. Very true. Very true. And
Well,
I love that you brought back, that when you step into a space of leadership, you need to be able to self-reflect and really understand how to work on you. And I think that if we look in the terms of leadership, of not only in corporate America, in businesses, in the entrepreneurial space, but if you look at it in regards to your life as well, it plays a huge role. There is probably one place somewhere in your world where you ultimately have a leadership role, right? If you're a parent, you're a leader of your children. And that is a huge one that a lot of people don't realize. I didn't realize for a lot of years, but it's something that all of us need to be aware of, is being able to have that self-reflection, that we can improve and kind of let go of that ego a little bit, because while we are talking about business, this pertains to, in my personal opinion, in every aspect of your life in some way,
definitely.
shape, or form.
Mhm. Yes. And thank you for, and this is a wonderful, maybe a wonderful point that we can focus on as we get to the end of our conversation, is more in our personal lives. Later on today, I have a conversation, a recording of another podcast on leadership in the family, right?
Mm,
In marriage. Because if it is a relationship of influence, so yes, it happens, and it isn't about who has authority over the other in a marriage, but it's you there how you use there's power in that relationship. There's some sort of authority, and we're going back to how we think of authority, how we defined it
mhm,
before, right? And that power and that influence and that life giving. There's and then with your children. And if we think about it, sadly, I'm going to say a sad thing here, but it's something that we don't. It's a reality that we have to embrace as human beings. Is that the two most important things that most people will do, which is to be in a committed relationship and to parent. There's no required training or education for that. We get educated and trained for so many other things. We have
mhm,
certificates and licenses and degrees for so many other things. And the two most important things that most people will do, and on which society is built, we don't train intentionally or educate ourselves intentionally as a society. There's really no
yeah,
requirements. Now, there's a lot of resources that people can do, and a lot of people do it. But I think we can, that mere fact says we can do a lot better here. Because if we look at, the challenges in the world, is a lot of it goes back to the family, goes back to
mhm,
relationships and how we parent, how we raise our children. So,
yeah,
so yes, and I love bringing it back to just really, then that's why I say lead better, love better, and live better. And it really starts with how I lead myself and how I lead in my intimate circles, which would be, in this case, family, intimate relationships. And then it's professionally and organizationally. But we have to start
yes,
there.
yeah, I agree
And
with
well, there's
that.
a
And
lot
I
that we
think
can
that
do. But yes.
Yeah. And I think that, if you look at that, it's a ripple across, right? Wherever you start, especially if you start with yourself, it ripples out across everything and everyone else. And you will see that it can transform and it can significantly change your relationship and your dynamics with your children, with your family, with your close circle, and then into your business, your corporations. Like, it does start to have that, but I agree with you. It does have to start with for us first. And I think that that is something that we need to be educated on a lot more than the
Right.
resources,
And
that are out
intentionality,
there.
and then with intentionality, it's so hard because work just really drives people, and if we think about it, most people spend most of their day at work or
Mm-hmm.
doing something like that. But the fact is, really, what's most important is our relationships and our intimate, committed relationships and children and our relationships with our children. And I think we require a lot more intentionality around that. We sort
Mm-hmm.
of if we in a you know if we managed our family, or as if we look at it like a business, with the same intentionality that we manage a business, well, I think a lot of families would be doing a lot better, right?
Oh
Because we
yeah.
have a plan, we have a vision. Who are we as a family? What do we do? Why do we do it? What are our values and principles? what do we want to achieve as a couple, and then for our children. When we have clarity, if we had a lot of intentional clarity around that, I think we'd be doing a lot better. But it means investing time. So I do a lot of couples work as well, and couples coaching,
Okay.
really geared towards this. There's this envisioning. It's not therapy by no means. It's really more using the art of coaching and some very sophisticated assessments that I use with couples. And it's to help them to see each other better, to listen better, to develop these skills, to grow in their awareness. Because as spouses, when you look at your spouse, you learn so much about yourself.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh, yes.
And it's a mutual thing. And so it's about having that openness, that humility, and that openness to learning and to growing together.
Yeah.
So yes, I just wanted to really validate what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that so much. And I think that this is a beautiful note for us to end on. And, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing this, because there's so many aspects of this that can touch all different areas of our lives. And it does start with, like you said, that inner reflection. So as we come to a close, one thing that I always ask all of my guests is, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
Mm. Well, the first quote that comes to mind is actually my own. That's not very humble of me, but I like it. It's only when you are at home with yourself are you ready to welcome someone into your home.
Oh, I like that.
It's more about relationships, but I think it's very important. There's a few truths enclosed in that phrase.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. We're totally going with that one. I love that. I think that closes, everything that we've kind of conversated around. So, Matthew, thank you so much for, being a part of the podcast today. Again, I can't thank you enough. Please do us all a favor and tell everybody, how can they connect with you? How can they find you? How can they be in your world?
Thank you. They can find me on different social media platforms. Brackettalliance.com is my website, but they can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, even TikTok, and
Uh-oh.
and on Facebook, all under my name, Matthew Brackett.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Matthew, so much for not only sharing this wisdom, but also the deep insight that you have and restructuring how we see certain words in our language. I can't thank you enough for that.
Thank you very much, Kat.
You are so welcome. And to everybody else out there, I hope you were taking notes. This was such a deep conversation. And I feel like, as we're moving into the second part of 2024, that a lot of people we're starting to see are shifting into realizing where they need to start and where their leadership comes from and how they need to start improving communication. And it does come back to us and ourselves. So I hope that you got so many takeaways from this conversation. If not, replay it. But be sure to follow Matthew. And of course, we'll have all of his information in the show notes. We'll make it super simple for you to be able to connect. And don't forget, until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, have a fantastic day. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own lotus effect.